Welcome to you to Gospel Conversations as we again break open the good news, the gospel. Mannie, your first time. Lovely to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
And in from Masterton, Lucy from Craighead School in Timaru, and Kelvin from across the water there, somewhere on the other side of the harbour in Otipoti, Dunedin. Kelvin, you've got a little bit of background on this little series of visions, series of moments from Luke.
Yes, it's one of those, I guess you'd say, portmanteau passages, I think, where little bits and pieces have been gathered up from all over the place, but they are connected by a number of themes. And one of the themes that struck me this week was this theme of anxiety. There's all manner of people that Jesus is addressing who are very anxious. So right from the beginning of Luke 12, there's people who are anxious over an inheritance, and the scribes and the Pharisees who are anxious over the proper use of the law, and then a rich young man who's anxious about money. And then there's this passage immediately before this one, which is echoed in the Sermon on the Mount about not being anxious about your clothes or your food, and all of that kind of thing. And then the gospel for this Sunday begins with this sort of evocative phrase: "Do not be afraid, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure." And this is echoing, which I think is the great anxiety that many people have, which is anxiety about God. And that underlies a lot of the other stuff, is that people are trying to avoid God because God is going to know exactly what they've been up to, and he's not going to be very pleased about it. So there's all of these anxieties, and it's it reaches a sort of a peak in this little parable in the middle about the servants who are waiting up. And I've read this passage, how many times, and I've never asked what I think is a really important question. Where did the master go? Why did they have to wait up? You'd think, the master would have a spare key. It seems that he's been at a wedding feast. So in those days, an important rich man going to a wedding feast, it would have been a political and a social event, more than a love match, usually. And so he's been away on business, really, and arriving at any time. Nobody knows the hour or the day, because the wedding is probably miles and miles away. And so somebody's got to wake up, because the lock would have been a great big wooden bar across the door, and somebody's got to lift it physically off so that he can get in. And so they're waiting up for him. And what does he do when he comes home? And this is this extraordinary little sentence that he girds himself about and begins to wait on them. And to gird himself about means that he's going to do what Jesus did at the Last Supper, that is, wash their feet and act as their servant. So this whole issue of anxiety is addressed in this stunning little metaphor of the all-powerful master who comes in and seeks to bless those who are waiting on him.
Okay, so there's blessing running through that in an anxious time, which would be a lovely thing to be able to convey. So let's go to you, Mannie. You're a school chaplain. You're working with lots of young people. But I want to hear, first of all, what you might find challenging here in this passage.
The initial challenge for me is, I think, the suggestion that being ready may have a negative attachment to it. And I think Bishop Kelvin talks about the anxiety. I was brought up in Africa, and for us, we always made sure we had backup provisions. We did, sort of things in reserve. But the challenge where are you placing your value and your focus? So if you are, buying insurance or having things in reserve, is that placing your value and focus in the wrong area? So that, poses a bit of a challenge for me.
So for you, Lucy, then, where again working amongst young people, but also just the facts of life, the living in the world that we live in, anxiety. Where's for you the challenge?
I think the daily challenge for me when I read this passage is the priority of Jesus and the challenge of checking myself and the community around me of where is our priority? Are we looking for Jesus, or are we too distracted on our devices, watching another Netflix episode, binging away, and being so distracted by all the things that look fun that we sort of forget about this monumental relationship that actually does mean absolutely everything.
Interesting that we've got this word distracted, incidentally, which of course was the Mary and Martha word just a week or two ago. And Mary was doing the right thing. Martha was distracted by many things. But anyway, Kelvin, let's actually hear the challenge for you when you read it.
Well, for me, there's two challenges. The first challenge is that right through Luke 12, there are all these people who've got their anxieties, but they've also got cunning strategies for meeting their anxieties, which are, all none of them can possibly work, but they've got them in place. And our tendency is that we know God can meet all our needs, but we hedge our bets. We have the our money and our security and our all this other stuff in the background that we rush back to. My challenge is what are my methods of meeting anxiety, which are still hanging around. And the other one is that this business which runs through the whole passage of not knowing at what hour the master's going to come. And this past week, Clemency slipped and broke her arm, and suddenly our entire life gets changed in a heartbeat. And this, we all know that this will happen, that events can take place which throw us back and onto our deepest resources, and all our clever little strategies suddenly don't work anymore.
So clever little strategies, are shattered, are thrown out of the water. Yeah. But that sounded rather a negative thing. So again, Mannie, can I come to you now again and some good news?
With working with young people, one of the things that we tend to hear of is the term FOMO, fear of missing out. And young people are always thinking, I'm going to be missing out on what's going on. But verse 32 starts with don't fear or fear not, depending on what translation you look at. This is a great comfort as we're promised from the start of the passage that God will provide for us. Like the servants who were found ready for their master, we are encouraged to also be ready. I believe our life choices and the way we deal with the people around us, prepares us for any future encounters in life that we're given.
Encouraging. Lucy, again, working amongst young people who've got huge anxiety issues around the world that we're leaving them.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. The big good news story for me in that passage is that those who are looking ahead to Jesus' coming and are seeking the priority of Jesus in those daily moments of life, the passage talks about how the one who is waiting is the blessed servant. And that immediately puts us back into the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew, where you hear, blessed are the poor in spirit. And they're often followed by these dichotomies or these two different ways of being, where there's, in this passage here, we've got the servant who isn't waiting and what happens to them, and the servant who is. And just that deep, blessed encouragement that actually, we can right now, we have an opportunity to turn around and to be that blessed servant. We don't need to run away from that moment. We can realize and we can change now in seeking God.
And blessing, such a rich word. Kelvin, good news.
Well, the good news for me is in this image in the middle of the little parable is of the all-powerful and the great master coming back and entering the house and immediately serving and caring for his servants in an act of love and seeking their very best and seeking their joy and their happiness. And for me, the good news is, we relinquish all of these plans we have for happiness, which can't possibly work. And at the end of that relinquishment, it's not death or loss. It's the gain of that great joy of the maker of all things, seeking to love us and serve us.
That is remarkable good news. But so what? Because we get very busy. Lucy, it's a busy world for all of us. So what? We're loved.
It is definitely. So that's so what for me, and working with a lot of my young people, they live in this world of a cancel culture. So if they speak up about their faith, they're likely to be looked at as a weirdo or ostracized or socially excluded or chucked off one of the other many, many social media feeds they're a member of. And actually what it is it's that encouragement daily to prioritize Jesus. We often, we don't grow in relationship just by accident. We do actually have to do something about it, even though actually it's not what we have done that earns that grace. It is the free gift. And so it's this weird dichotomy of actually, seeking Jesus, needing to prioritize him, and at the same time prioritizing it with open hands, ready to receive the grace he's ready to give, which is very, very, very different to the cancel culture we see in our society.
Huge contrast. Mannie?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we prepare not necessarily by always being awake, but by being faithful. Lives that are guided by biblical principles help us to be ready. If we choose to live lives that are questionable, not only do we risk not being ready, we also let ourselves down today. People will not value or want to spend time with us. And the young people that I certainly work with are finding encouragement in biblical messages that we're sharing, because a lot of the messaging that they're getting from sort of TV, video games and everything else are not giving them that encouraging message. And when we are sharing and explaining that, although this is from 2,000 years ago, it's relevant today, and the good news is definitely there. We're not to trust in money or other earthly measures of wealth, or the anxiety and the fear of missing out is not that important. If we're faithful and we live just lives, then things will be okay.
Lovely, and I sense a real familiarity when the master comes home and kneels at the feet, and there's a readiness because they know him, although they have been anxious. So let's leave it with you, Kelvin. So what for you as you encounter this person?
Well, the so what for me is sort of a contrast to everything I've said before, and that right through this passage there is this note of warning that the love and the grace of God is offered to us, but it's a conversation, it's a two-way thing, and we can miss it. We can be so distracted and living lives which take our attention away from where it needs to be. And the so what is the reminder to me to live a life which is resonant with the gospel, and to not be distracted by my own foolish plans for happiness which can't possibly work, and to put my attention where it needs to be. And that's with the Lord and Maker of all things, who seeks to love me and seeks to make of me what he knows I can be.
This love that breaks through as he comes in through the then unbarred door. That's a lovely image. Thank you to all three of you for breaking out this breaking open this little scripture and finding just wonderful encouragement in shaky times that we're probably in. So Mannie, lovely to have you, and we look forward to having you again. Lucy,
thank you.
Thanks for breaking open the word.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Happy day.